Library. And I thank everybody for coming tonight. I want to just make a couple notes about the library. As a result of the Omicron virus, we are doing curbside services only. But I say curbside services only, and that's really misleading because the library is just as active as ever, really. We don't have the facility itself open, but we are open if you need any help with any kind of virtual program that we have, or you need a notary, or you need copies made, or you need to, learn how to use Hoopla, or you need to get materials. We have a food drive going on. We have all kinds of services. And if there is something you need, you can either contact us through our Gmail account or just give us a call. The staff is working inside the library and we're available to help. I also want to take this opportunity tonight because I just, you always hear negative things, and Red Bank is a really amazing community. When you look around at the services that are there in Red Bank, I mean, lunch break, when what they offer to the community, Pilgrim Baptist Church, the Soul Kitchen, the Parker Clinic. I mean, these are just a few of the organizations that are there helping the community. So, we feel really blessed to work in Red Bank. We also know that this program itself would not have been able to be launched in a lot of communities. And we really, really thank all of you for always joining us and supporting this program. I also really want to thank Patti White, as always. She's, if you didn't catch it and weren't here for our last program last month, she was the 2021 Volunteer of the Year. And believe me, she earned that title. Her endless work for this program, and also Claire Phelps has helped greatly, and Kerwin Webb, and I know I'm forgetting a lot of people, but this program would not be what it is without all of these volunteers helping us so much. I also want to give a shout out to Allison Perrine, who is a senior reporter for the Two River Times. And she comes to every single one of our programs. Ever since we've been virtual, Allison has not missed one program, and she reports what's happening in the programs and gets the word out to the whole community. So Allison, thank you so very much. And also Miss Sierra, who has joined us for many programs, who works at the Red Bank Library. She does an amazing job at every second Saturday of the month. She has a diversity program for children. So I really encourage you, it's a virtual program, but take a look at our calendar. Don't miss all the amazing programs to toot our own horn that are happening. And again, as always, I thank you very much for joining us. Please spread the word. And so next time, instead of 76 people registered, maybe we have 176. Thanks again for joining us. I'm going to turn this over to Patti, and she's going to introduce Kerwin Webb. Patti.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining this great program, and belated Happy New Year. I would like to say that, first of all, we're going to do, before I introduce Kerwin, I just want to do a very short reminder. We're all getting pretty good at Zoom, and I see most of you muted yourselves. So just remember to keep your device muted when you're not speaking, and there will be time later in the program for people to address their comments or questions to the presenters. We do want to hear from you. This is one of the aspects that's made this such a successful program, is the community involvement. So if we do find that there's noise coming from somebody's device, we may mute you ourselves, but I think we're all getting the hang of it. Also, I know that on some programs, you might be used to hitting the raise hand button. If you do that and we don't see you, then please just put your comment or name in the chat box that you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, because we're going to be monitoring that a little more closely. So for those of you, and I see a number of new faces tonight, for those of you who maybe this is your first time joining us, we celebrated 6 years in August of this monthly Let's Talk About Race program. And this entire project started from Linda's idea. And as she said, I'm a volunteer, and all of the fantastic, high quality presenters that we've had over the years are all volunteering their time. So in terms of, a program like this, if anyone in your own community would like to start a similar thing, please reach out to us and we can give you some thoughts and ideas on how to get something like this started. So I would like to say that Kerwin Webb is the man who needs no introduction, because we all know and love him so well. But for those of you who don't know him, he's going to be presenting tonight an update on the status of the project in Eatontown to erect a memorial in honor of Samuel Johnson, who was the one known or documented case of lynching in the state of New Jersey. In fact, Eatontown is maybe 2 miles from the border of Red Bank. It's right in our neighborhood. Kerwin is the president of the Greater Red Bank chapter of the NAACP. He also is the liaison for the Equal Justice Initiative Community Remembrance Project, on which is sponsoring this monument in Eatontown. So he has been an impetus and a leader and the main contact impelling everyone along. I think Kerwin will talk a little bit about the initial project in Montgomery, Alabama, where the lynching monument is now present. Kerwin also serves as a minister at the Second Baptist Church in Asbury Park. I actually have 3 full paragraphs of Kerwin's bio, but those are the main points. And I just want to say he's been helping this program for the last couple of years now, not only for the planning, but for presenting some wonderful programs. So Kerwin, welcome.
Thank you, Patti. Thank you, Linda. Thanks everybody for joining for this update on this important work. I'd also at this point like to invite a couple of the coalition partners, Bonnie Dyroski, she's here with me. I see Molly Walker also. And so I wanna, what I envision of this time, we had something else that was planned, but then another meeting called someone away. And so we're on the fly, but it's okay because all of this helps do what the original goal and intent for the Community Remembrance Project is, and that is facilitate dialogue, share information, and build bonds between people who would otherwise may not be in the same room. And so I'm gonna do a sort of overview of what this project is, in case you have no idea what we're talking about, so that you can be caught up. But then also, my hope is that at the end of this, there will be a couple of different things, ways that you can help participate, and so the Q&A will be helpful as well. I'm gonna share my screen, and we will walk together. This this product, this booklet, is the EJI Community Remembrance Project book. And this sort of is the guide of the work that we do in partnership with EJI. The project that we were talking about, it's commemorating the unfortunate lynching death of Samuel Johnson in Eatontown, New Jersey. The short story is he was accused of sexually assaulting a young white woman. And during the course of the altercation, the alleged rapist apparently said, "Do you know Mingo Jack?" And that was enough to arouse the citizens, a mob, and the sheriff to go and get Mingo Jack. They locked him up, and it has been reported that people in the town said, "I would not be surprised if he's killed before midnight." And so Mingo Jack was murdered in that jail. And part of this project is to not only share the difficult parts, but then to forge a way forward. Patti, I'm sorry. Patti has a video that is going to help center us. The lynching that happened that I just described happened in Wampum Park in Eatontown. And this past October, our coalition had their soil collection event. And we'll talk a little bit more on the other side. Patti?
On March 5th, 1886, a white mob in Eatontown lynched Samuel Johnson, a 66-year-old man known as Mingo Jack. Earlier that day, a 25-year-old white woman reported an assault, saying her black assailant asked if she knew Mingo Jack.
During an era when Black people were burdened with a presumption of guilt, the mere mention of Johnson's nickname was enough to arouse a mob to seek immediate vengeance before any investigation.
Shortly before midnight, the mob broke into the small jail. They brutally beat Mr. Johnson to death. Then they hung his body over the jail cell door. In the end, no one was ever convicted of the crime of murdering Samuel Johnson.
The truth comes in on the wind, is carried by water. There is such a thing as the truth.
Even though chattel slavery ended in 1865, slavery never really ended in the United States.
Everybody, put your hand over your drum. That's that single heartbeat that beats in every human being.
History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again.
That was one of the facets of the project. The Community Remembrance Project is in four parts. One, there's a soil collection element. Two, there's a high school essay contest. Three, there's the marker installation and dedication ceremony. And then the fourth component is the educational component. And that's where we collectively help do the work of telling a more complete story of this country, the bad parts and the good parts, the dark and the light. And to that end, one of the people who've been very helpful, this project has been going on for about 2 years. And so one of the people who've been very helpful in organizing educational events early on and has another educational initiative, Bonnie Dyroski. I want to let her share a little bit about her work with the coalition and then what she's working on now.
Thank you, Kerwin. That's a lot of laud for not a lot of work, but but thank you. One of the components of the coalition's work is education, it's awareness, it's helping people to have a better sense of what went on and what is going on in our country, and to give people an opportunity to dialogue about that. So one of the things that is near to my heart, I work with kids in ministry primarily at the United Methodist Church of Red Bank at this point. But I have run for, this will be the second year I am running an anti-racism story time for kids, much like what Sarah does. But the difference is that this is a Zoom program that will be, will have an interactive component so that kids can dialogue and interact with the presenters as well as with each other about the topics. So this is in line with Black History Month. It's also, there's an African American reading initiative, reading African American and Black authors. And so I have picked 4 stories. I'm going to share my screen. This is the, it's called No More Racism. It's a virtual story time on Zoom, and we're going to read 4 different books. I will have a co-host with me each week, which will be a person that is Black, so that we have a real balanced dialogue going on. And they're books that are, they're not heavy-handed. We're going to be very gentle in the way we approach this, but we're also going to speak to the real issues. When we say Black Lives Matter is one of my favorite books, it's a new book, and it's it presents all the positives also of why Black Lives Matter, as well as what the Black Lives Matter movement stands for. The Day You Begin, again, is very affirming about how everyone feels different and left out. Let's Talk About Race talks about how everyone underneath their skin is the same. And a kid's book about racism just explains the basic minimum facts about what racism is to kids. So this is for children ages 5 to 11. I'm going to put my contact information in the chat, as well as a link to the registration form. I'm doing it by registration for 2 reasons. One is so that parents can express if they have any questions in advance, as well as getting an authorization to do Zoom with their kids. Parents are welcome to join us. Grandparents are welcome to join us. It is not exclusively for kids. I hope by doing this that I will help parents start to have the difficult conversations that particularly white parents don't have with their kids about these issues. So that's my goal with doing that. And I feel like it's important to start with children because they're aware, they hear the news, they see people being upset, and they themselves may very well be subjected to racism. So, and there may be children who aren't aware of the perspective and the life situation of other kids of their age that they may or may not know. So it's open to anybody from anywhere. And thank you so much for the time. I'm really excited about it. The last time I did it, it was a small group, but it was really, really a wonderful experience for them.
Awesome. Thank you. I see Molly is here. Also, Brigitte Mondesir, who are both members of the coalition working with different parts. Would either one of you like to say a few words about the work of the coalition? So education is part, Bonnie's talking about that, us going around doing Zoom conferences, workshops, those types of things. Soil collection, again, you saw that one. And let me stop talking because I think Molly wants to say something.
Hi, Kerwin. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I joined the group last year about June. Finally got my schedule clear so I could attend their regular meetings and all, and jumped in a little bit. We're doing a documentary. You saw the clip that we just showed. I know a documentarian, and Kerwin has a vision of doing a documentary of why all these folks are getting together to do this project. My husband and I had visited in Montgomery, Alabama, December or Christmas time of 2019, just before the pandemic shut us down. And we were inspired to do some work. So I've been working with helping to get stuff together to create the documentary. I kind of put my hand in a lot of things. I was doing a little bit on the soil collection. I live really close to Eatontown, so I try to be hands-on because I can just run up there in 5 minutes. I'm working with the essay contest for the high school students. We did have a deadline for January 14th, but I was thinking, we realized that kids had finals and stuff. So we've actually extended the deadline to February 14th, right, Kerwin?
Yep,
February.
Yep, that's right.
And we have a whole help with it. We can give workshops on kids and develop
Uh-oh. Did she freeze?
She froze. Molly, your
Okay.
screen froze.
When she comes back, we'll bring her back.
is that better? Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna have to be screen off. We don't have a very good connection here. So that it was extended to February 14th. It's open to all high school 9th through 12th grader. There's a monetary prize of up to $5,000. So $5,000 will be shared amongst the prize winners, plus great swag from EJI. So we really encourage everyone to do that. I also personally am working on some genealogy, trying to find Samuel Johnson's relatives that might still be alive and in the area. So that's my genealogy bit that I like to do on Ancestry and other resources. So,
Molly, do you know Sarah Klepner?
yes.
I was on a meeting with her yesterday, and she said that someone that put her in contact with somebody else may be a relative somehow. So if you can connect with her, that might help with that, because she said something about it yesterday.
Yeah, and the guys who worked in Eatontown, who all grew up there, they said they had some ideas too. So I have to get back to that. I had to take a little break. I just had a baby, so I didn't have a mic.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Molly. As you guys can see, our coalition is diverse, it's broad, and we touched on different areas, and we're coming at this from different points, because we believe it's important, because it's our history, and because it's also continuing to happen. And so our goal is to take lessons and to offer advice, suggestions on how we can talk our way out of this, get back to a sense of human. And that's part of one of my goals with the project and beyond. I will give an update on the marker, but I also want Brigitte to have an opportunity to share, talk, and say a little bit about her work with us crazy people.
Yeah, I guess I'm one of the crazy people then. I just wanted to thank everybody who's been involved with this project thus far. I got involved with it almost from the inception when it was brought to us, and it was initiated out of Pilgrim Baptist Church with Pastor Terrence K. Porter. And we've held a few educational, presentations at the church and in other parts. This has been a long and an ongoing process, well worth it. I just want to say that really my motivation for getting involved with it is simply the fact that as the foresight of EJI indicates, without documentation of our history, it can literally be denied. And we've seen a concerted effort along those lines, particularly recently, because it seems that that's the natural backlash to any sort of awareness and observation of history, is to then counter that with a denial and of that particular history, particularly when it's one that's shameful and makes everybody feel uncomfortable. But in doing so and denying it, it calls for what I perceive as adding insult to injury, and it's really a disservice on all parties involved. So for that reason, and mostly for that reason, I am well motivated to be involved in this project, as we should all be, so that we can be better educated as to why things are the way they are, and so that we can be more informed to combat the persistent push of denial. So that's what this project is really all about. It's to educate, and it's to keep that history in front of us so that we don't pretend that it wasn't behind us. And that's basically it.
Awesome, awesome, thank you. With that educational part, the soil that was collected on October the 24th, our soil collection committee, we met last night, and we are planning to host a series of pop-up exhibits with the soil. The soil that was collected from the lynching site, it's in jars. We're designing a display for it, and we are hoping to have it to be a focal point and a topic of conversation or programming. And we're looking at areas like libraries, schools, churches, if they'd like to have it, as a way to, again, like what Brigitte talked about, what the whole project is, to make sure that history is shared, but also forging ahead, communication, facilitating dialogue. And so if there are any areas, any institutions, any places, any organizations that might want to host the soil, we are right now, tentatively, we're looking at a place being able to host the soil for between 2 and 4 weeks. So it'll be a temporary display where you can do programming around it. We're trying to develop get enough people to come out and be speakers at an event or program if you so desire. So that will be more information about that'll be coming out later, but we're looking to start the exhibits in March and sort of use this year as the year of the traveling exhibit to see, and then next year we may expand it or decide that it's done its purpose. So that's that part. The essay contest, as Molly shared, is asking high school students to write about a situation of injustice and share some insights on how we can move forward. A lot of times the answers to the questions that we have, they're in the minds and the mouths of our young people, and we don't allow them the opportunity to share it. And so please encourage people to go to the coalition's website, njremembrance.org. You can find information about all of the programs. You can find information about the essay contest. And if we need to, we can schedule help desk sessions to help students, teachers, if they are encouraging students to write. So talked about education, we talked about soil collection, we talked about essay contest, and the big noticeable part is the historical marker. I will share my screen. This is an example of what the EJI historical marker looks like. Ours would have the state of New Jersey instead of Alabama. And then similar setup. The reason that Rick Gefkin couldn't be here tonight is he's at the Eatontown Council meeting presenting as they're working through the wording, the finalized wording for the marker that we'll have. So that's, this is what it looks like. This is what the marker will look like. It will go at a location in Wampum Park. And the tentative date for marker installation is June 19th, I believe. June 19th. Or no, that might not be the installation date. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's the 18th.
18th. And that might not be the installation date, that might be the dedication date. So they'll install it, and then a few weeks later, we'll have the celebration. Thank you for that, Molly. And what we were hoping to accomplish with the wording is to encapsulate the story of Mingo Jack in a way that we honor his life and his memory, and also sort of mark a moment in time where people say enough, looking back and projecting forward. And our hope, our desire is to engage as many people as we can. A lot of these Zoom calls that I'm on, a lot of these opportunities that we have are with people who largely agree and largely are on the same side. What I've started to use these opportunities for are workshops of engagement. How do we engage with people who aren't going to agree? How do we have the conversation with someone who is going to say, no, we don't need this, we don't want this, this is divisive. So for a few moments, I'd like to open up. Well, first, let me take a pause. I'd pause and say, are there any questions, thoughts, or anything about anything that we've presented so far? And then we'll do our workshop dialogue. No? Okay.
So Kerwin, it occurs to me that this whole educational component and conversation ties right into the current conversation, shall we say, about critical race theory and how we navigate all of that.
So let's raise your hand if you know what critical race theory is. All right, let's see. Who wants to say what critical race theory is?
I nominate Birgit.
I'll give it a shot. I'm not going to proclaim to be an expert, but really it is the discussion about the intersections of how race affects the lives of people in maybe in a very small nutshell. So it is that intangible thing that we try to discuss in ways in which it can impact the lives and well-being of not just people of color, but everybody in general, because there are certain conclusions, whether real or not, and there are certain practices and policies, all of which are based in race that then have intersections in the lives of people whose lives are also that of people of color, and even not, because it's that interaction, it's that intersection where those things come together and how they actually impact the outcome of what would otherwise be maybe an even playing field, so to speak. It's that thing that we try to grapple with, and we try to see to what extent does it impact the lives of everybody who's involved. And that is people of color as well as those who aren't. It's that thing, it's kind of like, it's like the yeast in bread. You don't really know what makes the bread rise, but there's yeast in there. You won't taste it, but without it, it wouldn't rise. It's that leveling agent. So critical race theory is literally the discussion of how that agent interacts with the outcome of what that final product is, a loaf of bread. I'm just trying to really simplify it so that people can understand.
Okay,
so let me discussed.
All right, so let me ask you this then. Go ahead, Eileen.
I think this question is really timely because a cousin of mine this weekend was asking whether the company I used to work for, did they set curriculum? Because there is this awful thing going on with curriculum. And she said, I can't remember the name of it, but I knew very well what it was. And what I wanted to say to her is that a lot of people who oppose critical race theory really don't know what it is. And then I thought, but I don't know enough how to explain it. So I'm in that same group too. So I think this is really valuable. Thanks.
Okay.
I just wanted to add, Kerwin, that critical race theory is an offshoot of racism. In other words, with this marker and what we're doing is a documentation of history. That's not a theory, that's a fact. The critical race theory looks at how those types of experiences intersect the lives that we live now. At least that's my understanding of it. So it's not the same thing.
Right. I have so many thoughts. Bear with me as we sort them out. One, Eileen, I'm glad, I'm thankful that we are broaching this subject, because my hope now is that at least a little bit, everybody will leave here with something that they can take away if they're in a situation that a conversation like that comes up. Because out of fear, people are using critical race theory as the boogeyman to shut down any conversations that are uncomfortable. And what may be a good discomfort for those people who are in that mindset is the most powerful question you can ask anyone. Why? Why do you say that? Why do you believe that? And then help them to talk out their contradictions and inconsistencies or misconceptions. Because it's a process of helping people to understand that you are not a bad person because you have misinformation. If you choose to stay in misinformation when an alternative is there, then okay, maybe you're drifting to bad. But if you don't know and you're open to learning, it's okay. Let's learn together. Here is what my understanding of critical race theory is, and then I'll tell you what it's become. Critical race theory was the examination of how race functions legally, how race as a category functions, shows up, and manifests itself in society. Quick example: powder cocaine, crack cocaine. Chemically identical, same. One, you are sentenced lighter than the other. What was the impetus for this differentiation? Well, the racist policies of people who decided that this chemical compound that dark-skinned people, brown-skinned people took, that's a 30-year mandatory minimum. And this fair-skinned person does this. Oh, we're not gonna kill their college chances because of this little thing, right? So it was scholars looking at how can you justify this difference? And out of it was born this theory that is being called critical race theory. It has become a boogeyman because any honest discussion about race puts up a mirror to people. And if you have any humanity or any goodness about you at all, it's gonna make you uncomfortable to know how evil people can be. Now, that's bad, but you know what's worse? I bet that there were times where we probably look back at some horrific incident and said, how could people let that happen? Is that about right? How could anybody do, right? What are we going to say when people look back and ask us that? How could you all let this happen? What am I talking about? Life is intersections. Life is a web of connectivity. Life is voting rights. Life is healthcare. Life is food security. Life is all of these things that are combined. And so, as we tell one truth, we necessarily have to look at the other truths. That if we created this problem, we have to fix it. The Marker Project, the Community Remembrance Project, started, it is a culmination of the work of Bryan Stevenson. And I think Patti put in the chat that Bryan Stevenson's book, Just Mercy, turned into a movie. It is about a lawyer, Bryan Stevenson, who went down to work death row cases in Alabama to try to help people get off of death row because Alabama, Alabama. And his life's work became defending the cause of the innocent. Those faith-based people like myself, he was doing similar work to what Jesus would have done. And of course, his life wasn't easy. Of course, people did not like him coming down, these outside agitators coming to Alabama to make people think and hold us accountable. Can't have that. But through his persistence and through God's grace, he's opened the Legacy Memorial, Montgomery, Alabama. People call it the Lynching Memorial. Same thing. But there's also a museum, the Legacy Museum and the Peace and Justice Memorial is what it's called. And it's one of those things, one of those places that you go and you leave changed. My goal with the coalition is that maybe we'll be able to finance a trip for some young people to go down and do a pilgrimage so that we can see the history and understand the stories. And then that will help us to have an appreciation, a greater appreciation of what we have. When I worked with the United Methodist Church, we actually did that. We took a civil rights pilgrimage. It was about 20 high school students from around the state. And it was an amazing, transformative trip. We want to impact the lives of people, show them humanity. We want to help people to be included in dialogues and conversations. How do we do this? How do I have a conversation with somebody that I disagree with? Brigitte, can I pick on you?
Yes, of course.
All right. So let's role play. I'm going to be the difficult one, and you are the one who wants to talk about uncomfortable situations for me.
Okay.
I'm going to intentionally try to make you lose your mind. Show us how not to.
I'll give it my best shot.
Okay. Brigitte, I know that you're part of this coalition that's going around bringing up all of this negative talk. Why is this necessary? Why can't you leave the past in the past?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that it really isn't negative talk. It's actually truth telling. And
you're making my kids hate themselves.
Well, I don't think your kids would hate themselves if they truly understood what our history was about. And the only way we can get that understanding is to teach, and to teach the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
But see, that's it. You're trying to rewrite history. You're not teaching the truth.
No, I'm trying to rectify and right a wrong. The problem we're having is that the history that was taught.
So you're saying my history is wrong?
That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying at best it's incomplete. And if you don't believe that it is, then maybe you should listen to what I have to say and then come to your own conclusions, because I think you're making a decision without having all of the evidence placed in front of you. I think if you would allow yourself to see all of it and not just the part of it that you think you understand, you'd gain a greater understanding, and we can all move forward together as opposed to apart.
All right, what do we think of Brigette's job? How'd she do? She did all right? Okay. What are some
There'll
other
probably be,
objections?
you know, in all actuality, there'll probably be, you know, crazier people out there. But in any case, I wanted to say one thing before you move on. And I'm not getting into the knee deep of critical race theory, but I just wanted to give an example similar to the one you gave with crack cocaine versus, I guess, cocaine. And why was there even a distinction between the two? And the distinction, of course, was based right in the middle of the race line. When white people were arrested, it was cocaine. When Black people are arrested, it's crack. And therefore, even though those two substances are chemically the same, by giving it two different names, we can then apply two different kinds of punishments based on race. But even more so, if that's too ambiguous for some, then maybe we can go right to the Supreme Court with US policy and law. Because the biggest example of critical race theory and the offshoot of what we're calling critical race theory is Plessy versus Ferguson. That is what laid the entire ground, the blueprint for critical race theory, because it is in that one major ruling where the Supreme Court, which is a legal policy, established separate but equal. And what exactly was separate and still equal? Well, the two races were separate and were still yet claiming to be equal. So that's actually a policy that then gave birth to lots of other things that impacted the lives of Black people in ways that critical race theory is examining.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, thoughts?
So Kerwin, this whole idea of conversations and how to have these conversations, it's so, it's fraught with emotion, as we know. And maybe you would like to, we could talk a little bit about what's in the guidelines from the Equal Justice Initiative in terms of some of the necessary virtues. And I can read some of them off. Honest, when we're having these conversations in terms of educating and remembering history: honesty, integrity, humility, respect, empathy, grace, transparency, unity, and collaboration. It's hard to not get engaged in emotion and to remember all of those things.
Yeah. Eileen?
Oh, I was just going to say that the question you asked, Kerwin, about, are you trying to make my child ashamed of himself or herself? That is just so at the heart, I feel like, of many white parents' argument, when they really don't know. But I think if we as individuals who are supportive of this, if we can't address that question, it's going to be hard to explain ourselves to people, because people don't want facts and figures. They want you to answer their emotion and their fears, I think.
Bonnie?
I just wanted to speak to that. I was part of a conversation that happened between some people that were disagreeing about this. And one of the things that came up actually was specifically that by addressing and talking about issues of racism, we were actually victimizing the young Black children who were by naming it. And so it's not just you're making my white kid feel bad. There's a perception that we're making kids who are the victims and the recipients of racism like more aware that they're recipients of racism somehow by talking about it. So it crosses, both ethnic groups.
Yeah. And anybody feel free to jump in here. I'm swimming in thoughts because that is so complex. Because there's some truth in both. Would a young white child who learns that their grandparents, great grandparents, or whatever had a fraud history, would they feel bad? Probably. Can making a victim of oppression, naming that, can making them more aware of that make them more aware of just how insidious? Yeah. And I think, though, that they already see it and know it, but don't know who to talk to about it, how to share what they're experiencing, what their experience with it. So to the parents who are afraid that their child is going to learn this, they're going to learn it anyway at some point. And it's better that I think it's better that they see mom and dad actively trying to help make it better than trying to pretend that it doesn't exist. But I don't envy parents or people who have to have those conversations, who have to, I don't envy school board members who have to defend the fact that we're not doing this to parents who are convinced that you are, even though you're not. I don't envy that. I don't envy, but here's what I do know, though, that comfort is the enemy of progress. And so long as we're comfortable, we would be okay with being okay. It's only in those uncomfortable spaces where someone is doing something that is not overtly racist or oppressive, but it has that effect. It might be time to where we give up our comfort and say, this is harmful in this way. I think that is because some people are unaware. There's some people who are doing things that are being perceived as intentional and they're unaware. And maybe it's just somebody tapping them on the shoulder and letting them know that, hey, when you say that word, it doesn't come off well to someone who is not you. Those types of taps on the shoulders may be helpful. Patti, Linda?
Amy Downey has her hand raised, Kerwin.
Okay, go ahead, Amy.
And before she goes, I just want to say about marijuana. When you look at the legalization of marijuana today, I mean, you have to be a millionaire to open a store or whatever. And you think about how many Black young youths spent years in jail for selling maybe a quarter of an ounce, many of whom are still in jail, who haven't been able to
say still there.
And now it's big business.
Absolutely.
For millionaires. Amy?
Hi, thanks. I think the comment I wanted to make in reference to making our kids feel bad with critical race theory or teaching critical race theory, I think another component to that is also that the parents are projecting that on their kids. Absolutely. In the sense that there is also the parents thinking, you're trying to make me feel bad. You're trying to make all white people feel bad for the sins that we may or obviously didn't commit in slavery, but may still be committing now. But just that sense of, you're going to make all of us feel bad. We don't we don't want that, and we definitely don't want you teaching our kids that. So it's interesting that it's critical race theory in the schools and they can't teach it, but I think it is also a larger question in the country in whole, on the whole, that people just don't want to know about it or deal with it. So I think that there's that level there too. I just wanted to make that comment.
Kerwin?
Yep.
You know, in terms of how to have these difficult conversations, one of the people who have impressed me the most is Daryl Davis. And for anyone who doesn't know who Daryl Davis is, just go on YouTube and you can look at a few short videos, some TED Talks. There's even a whole documentary on him, which I think was called, I can't remember the name of it, but Daryl Davis is a Black musician who has spent years befriending Klansmen, people who belonged to the Klan. And bit by bit, he has listened to them, he has befriended them, and over the years, he has actually has a collection of the discarded Klan robes that these people gave him when they renounced their membership in the Klan. And he talks about the process of how he treated even them as fellow human beings. And I just think it's a wonderful example for everybody, not just Black people.
Thank you for that. Anybody else?
Also, just Sue Goldberg put something in the chat that Florida has a law to allow parents to stop the teaching of anything that makes them feel or their students feel uncomfortable. Students are now subject to lawsuits in the state of Florida.
Teachers, not students. And I don't think they've passed it yet, but it's going to be very soon.
What does that say more about our electoral system, our educational system, or what? Because, yeah, I'll just leave it. What does that speak to? The fact that teachers now can be sued, or if it passes, once it passes, teachers can be sued for teaching things that makes my child, which is a subjective measure, feel uncomfortable. What kind of, how do we wrap our head around this?
Yeah.
Oh, I have something to say there, if I may go. It's Amy again.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot packed in there, but your question of what does it speak to? For me, first and foremost, it is electoral, because I think there's huge issues with gerrymandering across the country, number one, and number two, term limits. And this may be getting off topic a little bit, but I think that if gerrymandering was taken care of, and I'll use that term taken care of to mean whatever we think it means, outlawed, changed, whatever the case may be, and term limits are put in place for all elected positions, that there would be a larger turnover of elected officials, because I feel that, and I can't say this with certainty in Florida, but I can say it in certain areas, people become entrenched, politicians become entrenched, and there's no change. They just keep on getting voted in, and these things can happen. And which kind of takes me into the voting rights legislation that is stalled, and I'll stop right there because I'm saying too much.
Not at all.
Not saying too much. I don't want to hog the time is really what I was trying to say.
You're not.
So Judith Stevens was also had a comment in the queue, and somebody had a raised hand.
And Sue Goldberg has a raised hand. Judith, you want to go first? Or do you want us to read it?
It's just there if anybody wants to read it. It was just an observation that looking at this group, and I'm not making judgments globally, but we are an older population here this evening. Most of us went through seeing things like Ruby Bridges entering school in Louisiana, or the desegregation, supposed desegregation of colleges in the South when we were children. And we were appalled and aghast perhaps if we, depending on the households we were raised in, at what we saw, at broken bottles being brandished at a 6-year-old. I mean, and then you had a lot of questions. So this is nothing new. Children absorb this all the time. They are aware of racism. They're aware of viciousness of people that people condone in one another. We're aware that viciousness is propagated by people on bully pulpits. Banishing discussions in school is probably the worst thing you can do to allow a child who might otherwise be imbibing this with mother's milk to a free and informative discussion in something that is usually as neutral as a school.
When we first started this program, one of the things I found really frustrating, though, was, we were meeting in person and so many people would say, oh, but the young people, they're not prejudiced. So the young people were going to save the world because nobody that was young had a prejudiced bone in their body. We've come a long way now and realize there's still a lot of prejudiced parents out there that are raising prejudiced children. So
yeah, I'm a retired teacher. I've been pulled into principals' offices several times to have discussions about calls from parents about why I was teaching LGBTQ issues and why I was teaching race issues in my English class.
Right.
And all you can do at that point is shrug your shoulders and say, if you have something to put in my file, do so. If not, leave me alone.
Sue?
I guess I just wanted to say that I agree that there should be better term limits for most elected offices. But I think we face a bigger challenge today than we ever have before because of the kind of propaganda that is out there all the time on television, on social media, that our kids are exposed to sometimes and often without the parents knowing this is what they're reading and looking at, but also it's brought into their home. Every family that chooses to watch Fox is bringing that into their home on a daily basis. And it's pushing lies out every day that make the job of teaching truth harder, even without the laws that are being proposed. Just if you tell lies enough, people believe them.
Start to believe it. Yeah.
And I don't know what we do to combat that.
Actually, Kerwin, I think you said something early on when someone challenges this conversation, you just ask them, well, why? And ask people to explain what their so-called rationale is.
What about this conversation or about this topic makes you uncomfortable? Why are you responding in that way? And because most of it is projection. Many people are projecting fear or misunderstanding, or even sometimes it's jealousy or hatred, and allowing people to hear themselves or to have to think about their inconsistencies in their behavior. Sometimes that's enough to challenge them to change. Reverend Craig, you look like you want to say something.
No, I'm just leaning forward because I'm in my kitchen and I was about to fall off my chair, but I'm listening very intently.
Thank you for being here.
Oh, well, I was about to say it's my pleasure to be here, but this stuff is not really about pleasure. Yeah, it's unfortunate, there's literally no school in the country probably teaching what critical race theory actually is, because it's a legal concept that racism is baked into the law, basically. But it's being used to prohibit people from having a sense of the actual history of the country, which is it's maddening. It's absolutely maddening, because how can we move forward and do anything that benefits more and more people if we don't have a sense of where we come from, and we don't have a sense of the true nature of how the country was constructed, literally upon all of this kind of vitriol and abuse of others. It's extraordinary that this is happening in the country. I guess you can't be surprised by anything. But the project you're all involved with is just it's just stunning. I'm so thrilled to hear all of the different components of it, and I think it has to open up conversations. And I love what is being done with the kids. That series, I've written it all down, taken the notes so we can share it with our kids. But congratulations, and it's just beautiful. I know that the congregation I serve is going to be hosting the essay contest, and some of our folks are involved in your project, and I've been skirting the edges of it, but I'm so glad to hear all of these details. Kerwin's really fantastic project.
Thanks, Reverend Craig. I see Amy and then Marianne.
Here's another question that I have for anybody who would want to answer it. Talking about critical race theory, projecting, et cetera, one of the observations that I've had, and I could be incorrect in this because the timeline may not line up, but one of the thoughts that I had in reference to the reaction to critical race theory and the laws in Florida is that it is a direct reaction, the next step to the reaction to the George Floyd murder, in the sense that after that and the uproar in the country and the protests, and there seemed to be so much momentum for progress in race relations and police brutality. And then critical race theory, which was not new at that time, but seemed to come into the news cycle and into, sorry, words are escaping me, comes into the news cycle, more people are getting to know about it. And it seems to me that the reaction to critical race theory is a reaction to the momentum of better race relations after the George Floyd murder. Does that make sense? And does anybody else think that?
It makes sense to me. Yeah, I have more thoughts, but I'm gonna let Marianne go. But yes, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, I tend to agree with a lot of the comments that have been made around the politicization, and I think using critical race theory in an inappropriate way to not really address our real concerns. But this is on a kind of a personal note, going back to some of the things that Patti was sharing. And I think one of the challenges, and I'm trying to think about how to talk to some folks I know or listen to some folks I know. One of the challenges for white Americans, I think, especially of European descent, is we have to be able to hold two opposing ideas of our forebears in mind. And we were tended to be raised on, they were brave, they crossed the ocean, yada, yada. And we have to be able also to keep in mind that they took land from people who were already here. They enslaved people for hundreds of years. And we have to, we need to be able to deal honestly with both of those ideas. And I think people we just want to hear the glorious part and not acknowledge the truth of our history. And so I think in any ways that we can, and so I think how sad it is that parents don't let children begin to learn in school the true lesson of our history. So I don't have anything particularly to share beyond. I keep trying to think, how can I sit and listen to somebody so that at the end of our time together, or maybe it's several times together, that idea that, yes, there were brave things our forebears did, but there were also some really horrible things, and they've been passed down from generation to generation. And how do we become accountable for that, or try to make a difference? So I appreciate the conversation. Thank you all. I'm trying to learn myself, so thank you.
Forget.
Yes, I'm sorry, I had some router problems in the midst of all of it, so I apologize if I haven't heard everybody's comments. But what I can say, to put it profoundly, is that critical race theory is actually being applied to critical race theory. So what do I mean by that? We don't complain about the Jewish people talking about the Holocaust, and we don't say that this is teaching Germans to hate themselves. It's viewed in an entirely different light. So you could actually say that the theory of critical race is actually being used in the most exemplary way in denying and not wanting to learn about critical race theory, because that's the juxtaposition where we're at. We don't want to learn about the thing that we don't want to learn because it's about Black and white discrimination. It's about that relationship. So critical race theory and the whole hoopla about it is the perfect example of critical race theory itself. Because we've been able to talk about these things when it didn't involve people of color. And the Jewish Holocaust is the biggest example I can give of that. That doesn't project guilt on Germans or German children, and nobody complains about, oh, well, that makes German people feel bad or guilty. But yet, that's the argument erroneously being used to deny the theory of critical race, which is critical race theory. So it's critical race theory being turned on itself and being the best example of exactly what it is that it is, right? It's that thing that stops us or gets us to the point in where we find ourselves, you see? So it's critical race theory literally explaining itself in the way in which we're using it right now. Because that is all based on the fact that we're talking about Black and white relationships. Does that make sense?
Birgit, you always nail it right on the head. Thank you. That was brilliant.
I agree with the first half of that. I definitely think that systemic racism is keeping us from learning about systemic racism. I disagree with the bit about the Holocaust, because while Germany has faced it, our country hasn't.
Okay.
And it is not allowed to be taught in a lot of places, or it's barely taught. And you can say the same thing about the internment camps for Japanese Americans. There were many things done in this country or not done in this country that allowed those things to happen. And people are not comfortable with it. And the Holocaust, I mean, if I go back to my own school days when we were closer to the time that it all happened and when it was more acceptable, to talk about it. It wasn't covered. My history classes didn't cover it. My history books barely mentioned it. And that hasn't changed, just like it hasn't changed in all the states where Texas, I'm talking to you, where textbooks are published. So I agree with the premise about systemic racism preventing us from learning about systemic racism, but not necessarily using the Holocaust as the analogy. That's all I wanted to say.
Can I respond to that? And I'm not being argumentative. That's not the point of this, because I think what you're referring to is how Americans see the Holocaust and not how Germans see the Holocaust, right?
Yes, Germany has come to face.
Yes, they have.
In World War II, they have.
They most
very
certainly
well.
have.
Very well.
Yes, and
This
to
country,
the
not so much.
right, to the extent that they've paid reparations to Jewish people. So that's what I'm referring to. What I'm talking about is the juxtaposition between Germany and America. That's the difference. Germany isn't seeking to deny what has happened, or not seeking to distance themselves, or not, or in so many words, right? I'm not being exact, but what I'm saying is they've taken tangible steps that show accountability for that history. And that's yet to be done in America. So I'm juxtapositioning the two countries and what has come from that. In other words, Germany has faced its critical race theory, and it's faced it head on, maybe, much more so than America ever is even trying or attempting to do. So that is what I was saying.
That makes sense.
Right, Germans didn't say, oh, we don't want the Holocaust taught because it's going to make us feel guilty. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. I'm not talking
makes
about how
sense.
Americans, right? I'm not talking about how Americans view the Holocaust, because in that respect, it's the same.
I think we would have a very hard time finding a good analogy within our own country.
Right.
To do those two, because I don't think we've really faced much of anything in this country.
Right. Yeah. And
All right.
the other
Forget
part
it.
to that.
Nope.
Okay.
So we're almost at time, which is the only reason that I'm cutting Brigitte off. And also, Amy said something before, electoral. A lot of the problems that we face are because not enough concerned and rational-minded people are engaged in the process. I want to share with you a couple of pieces of legislation that are of interest and importance to me that I invite you to read up on and maybe take action on. One, I think it was 2002. The state of New Jersey adopted or approved the Amistad law that requires African-American history is taught in schools, high schools. I don't believe yet that Amistad curriculum has been implemented into our curriculums. And so if you all would be so kind, let's talk to our legislatures and our people who have influence and ask them the question about, hey, this is a law that was passed. What are we doing to teach the law, right? I don't know how many spaces in New Jersey are trying to create laws for things that aren't being done, but we can say, hey, there is a law that's already been created. Let's just implement it. For me and some of the other groups that I'm with, reparations is a thing and something that we are trying to raise awareness and advocate for. There is a piece of legislation that is trying to work its way through the state legislature to create a reparations task force to study, right? Not saying that they're ready to start writing checks, but to study New Jersey and its proximity to how much it should repair its citizens. That's another one. That one is being sponsored by the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. So those are two, Amistad curriculum and reparations, but also education, right? Segregation in schools. These are things that we know can have a direct impact in changing some of the inequalities, some of the miseducation that happens in our school system and in our state. And it's going to take people like us who have the capacity, the time, and the ability to just make one more phone call or send one more text or ask somebody to send a letter for us, so that people know, the elected officials know, that the citizens in this state, in this area, in this county, they are concerned about these things. And so let them know that we want them, a representative democracy, a constitutional republic. We are supposed to be the ones to tell them what to do. Let's try to get that back on track. Linda, Patti, I'm going to stop talking so that you guys can close us out on time.
Just remember that was 20 years ago, that legislation, right? 20 years ago. And actually, I think we did a program about that going back. And I think Sid and Gilda went to the Red Bank schools about it. And, there was a push for it, but really nothing has been done in those 50 years.
Actually,
anyway.
I'm glad you brought that up, Kerwin, because that's a perfect example of something that can be done at the grassroots level. The legislation exists, a commission exists, but apparently there's no real way of implementing it or monitoring it. There is a curriculum available, I believe, but nobody monitors whether it's done in any particular school district. So if a group of parents got together in their town, I mean, it's an example of something real that could be done to ask it to be implemented, to talk to the teachers. But before we end, I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. Thank you so much, as always, for a great program. We're always looking for ideas for future programs. We do have our next program in February, which will be February 23rd. We'll be participating in the annual African American read-in. So we'll be looking for readers of all sorts to share writings from Black authors. And as you know, this program's being recorded. We've recorded most of our programs recently, and they eventually get posted on the library's Facebook page and YouTube page. That's the best place to look for it. So thank you again. Linda?
Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. I see Lorraine, you're with us, and hopefully you'll be a part of our February program. Everybody, please pass the word along. If people aren't able to join us for our programs, we do ask that they look at our recordings of the various programs we've done, and always contact the library with anything that you want to discuss in future programs. Thank you, everybody, for being with us tonight. It's our great pleasure. We would not, again, pleasure is not really the right word, but we're really happy to have these programs. And we're especially happy that so many people join us and continue to join us. We see a lot of familiar faces month after month. So thank you very much. And we hope to see you in February.
Thank you, everybody.
And also don't forget that the coalition is still looking for volunteers, people to help. And, if you have an organization that might be able to have an exhibit of the soil collection. Right now, our library is closed to the public, but as soon as we're open, we'll be doing that. So, please let Kerwin know if you have any kind of interest in the display.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Everybody, have a good night. See you next month.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye now.
Bye. Thank you.